The poem is called Vegetarian Physics. The tofu that's shown up overnight in this house is frightening proof of the law of conservation. Matter that simply cannot be created or destroyed. Matter older than Newton, who knew better than to taste it. Older than Lao Tzu, who thought about it but finally chose harmonious non-interference. I'd like to be philosophical too. See it as some kind of pale, inscrutable wisdom among my hot dogs, the cold chicken, the leftover deviled eggs, but I'm talking curdled soybean milk, and I don't have that kind of energy. I'd rather not be part of the precariously metaphorical wedding of modern physics and those ancient Eastern mysteries, but still, whoever stashed the tofu in my Frigidaire had better come back for it soon. I'm not Einstein, but I'm smart enough to know a bad idea when I see it, taking up space, biding its time, like so much that demands our imperfect attention amid the particle roar of this world. It's going nowhere fast. Give me that old-time religion at 12 years old on the streets of New Brunswick, New Jersey, floating out of the third-floor walk-up, the most amazing music I ever heard. Saxophone, angelic choirs of saxophones. No idea who or what or why, but later that day at the Rivoli Music Store on George Street, heard that it must have been Coleman Hawkins, tenor saxophone giant from big band era through swing, through bop. I met him on the street that day when I was 12, and he introduced me through this record spinning upstairs to the music that would become important in my life. In this dream, I meet him again. In my dream, Coleman Hawkins walked right up to me at the corner of West 52nd and Broadway, and he actually said, "Do you know how to get to Carnegie Hall?" And even in my dream, I realized he'd been dead since 1969, although I still couldn't believe it. His not knowing Carnegie Hall was only blocks away. So I figured he'd meant all along to be setting me up instead. But who was I to deliver a punchline to the hawk himself, the royal bean, to my ear, the unmistakable heavyweight champion of the tenor saxophone world? "I'll blow you a real quick chorus or two if you help me out just this one time, man." And that's exactly what the late Coleman Hawkins did. So finally, I had to tell him, practice. And I guess he had to laugh. That's really what I needed to hear. And then he thwacked me with his immortal horn, and I woke up to the coolest breeze through any window ever, my head still ringing with every strain of that jazz man's body and soul. This is from a long poem called Home Movies of the Space Race, just a short introductory poem called A Little Respect. At Hamilton Elementary, we watched every Mercury launch between the Pledge of Allegiance and our ration of morning milk on the battered TV that Janitor Geis always lugged into our room, trailing a whiff of the Lucky Strikes that somehow kept him going in the humble boiler room office he liked to call his very own mission control. The entire class would count down together until the launch tower fell away, the rocket booster fuel igniting with the kind of brilliant firepower that in those days never failed to lift our skittish hearts into our throats. We were suckers for anything astronautical, the suits, the helmets, the very idea of leaving the outmoded Earth behind us for a while. We'd come to live for the chance of escaping the pull of pre-adolescent gravity. So who among us would have believed we'd peter out so quickly, even before Apollo? We ho-hummed our way through most of Gemini, though Ed White's tethered spacewalk brought us briefly back. The way he floated outside that capsule, doing exactly what? We weren't sure. Led sci-fi Rosenberg to say maybe he'd grow up to be the first Jew on Mars. Benny the Bull kept asking, when do current events become history? And then would there be a test? I made a brazen grab for Debbie Fuller's hand. I really didn't know what I was doing either, but I might have been floating too. Until Mr. Geist told us all to knock off the funny stuff, to show a little respect, as if Ed White could possibly look down at us and refuse to clamber back inside until he had our full attention. Geist was a big picture guy. He saw the whole country being tested, and this was the kind of lapse in judgment we simply couldn't afford if we were going to beat those single-minded Russians to the moon. This poem's called Man Ray Stares into the Future of Jazz, 1919. Picture a quartet on the bandstand, drawn into the colors of pure sound. A whisper across a wet reed, the age-old tension between drum and stick, fingers just now touching down on the bass strings and the keyboard, and maybe the moon for all anyone knows about this history on the edge of being made. Someone's looking inside, these black and white notes rising, breaking free of their staves, swirling and jumping and curling, coming back together in wave after wave, towering sheets of music, sure to turn the shape of jazz inside out. And whoever listens to it will be utterly unstrung, assuredly giddy in this unheard-of spectrum. And no matter what they'll have planned for the rest of the day, they're bound to find themselves suddenly improvising all over the place. Later, there will be time for Miles and Train, the Duke and the Count, Prez and Monk and Dizzy and Bird, all those colorful names of jazz still to come. But right now, it's this offbeat cat, Man Ray, from Philly. And man, he's laying it down in those crazy tinted shades of gone yellow, gone orange, gone blue and green, and a few there are no proper names for yet. He's blowing a cool breeze of tempera and ink. He's stretching out, taking his solo anywhere he likes the sound of. Clearly, he's seen where the music is headed. He's heard something, and he's going exquisitely on record, making a brilliant note of it. This poem is called, This Poem Had Better Be About the World We Actually Live In. There's no chance of a proper introduction to the world, not given how we usually enter into it head first, crying, and if not exactly stunned, then wide-eyed in the sudden light and hungry most of all. Even before we know who we are, we call the world by its first name, which not so surprisingly turns out to be whatever we think we have coming. And doesn't that seem a little unreasonable? Familiar, considering the formal ages-old arrangement? We take our small place here, already squirming. We have to vacate the premises whenever the lease is up. We're signing on before we can manage even 2 real words in a row, but hey, we know the world when we see it. And when we say its name, we're so alive it hurts, already wishing it could stay said that inchoate way forever. A study guide in middle age. Now, there's no more relying on the first name of the world. It goes by pseudonyms, aliases, guises, and disguises, AKAs for all occasions, schoolyard nicknames, epithets, and honorary titles. And because there's no way you can hope to be encyclopedic, here are just a few of those it wouldn't hurt to learn remarkably suitable in a variety of situations. Fred, Kilroy, Sincane Crazy, Adelaide Crapsey, Larceny Whipsnade, The Little Tramp, Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. He who laughs last is slow to catch on. There will be a test on this. Too much with us, late and soon, late to supper, walk-ins welcome, God's whoopee cushion, the runaway train, all hat and no cattle. You can know by heart more names for the world than anyone alive, but you still can't take it with you. Rough and tumble, wash and wear, no shoes, no shirt, no service. Tiny bubbles in the wine, sweet Beulah land, gone fishing. Any makeup exam will be significantly harder than the one you should have been here for in the first place. Blood on the saddle, money in the bank, a few pickles shy of a barrel. I don't know art, but I know what I like. Let's not mistake whatever isn't hell for part of heaven. Last name, last. The world's last name is whatever we come up with when we leave it, ready or not, even if no one else in the room can hear us, if there is a room, if anybody else is hanging around. It's the last thing we have to say, even if we can't quite speak it out loud. It can't be as familiar as the world we were so sure of having all that time in. The last name of the world is likely something dusky, if not altogether dark. The last name of the world, assuredly, is nothing that will even once have occurred to us before. The last name of the world distinguishes it finally as still the only place that can sustain our fragile selves among so many scorched or frozen, far less habitable worlds. The last name of the world is inescapable, and right now at least, we can live with that, as long as we don't really know what it means. The last name of the world will be unmistakably ours. The Hard Rock Kid. In a sketch, he'd fall right in with the lines of the tree he lies against, flicking off mosquitoes, naming each one for a town with a face he'd recognize. Some young softball kid lays into a fat one, sends it skyward. Hard rock follows until eyes close and night sounds hum his body home. Half a century, and he knows the trains are faster. Days longer when the body slows. Still, small secrets get him by, like ways the blood knows to keep moving. Squeezes shut his eyes so tight, 100 headlights prick the black, and he picks one, imagines a rumbling familiar as breath, times his jump, but doesn't jump. This time, Sunday, no reason to move. He's gone, over and over his brain, every fold in the map of his country. He feels the red bandana in his pocket, balled up, clenched like a fist or a heart. Under the last moon, he remembers there are secrets he keeps to himself, that the lazy fly ball has finally fallen and gone home is one. And I think probably no hobo ever had a richer requiem as I have heard the voices of all of these folks tonight. The Hard Rock Kid.